Noun names something that can't be physically touched, an idea, an event, a quality or concept. Collective noun. Count noun. Pronoun. Verb. Adjective describes nouns and pronouns. Adverb describe verbs, adjectives, and even other adverbs, specify when, where, how, and why something happened and to what extent. Preposition. Conjunctions. Interjection. Personal pronoun. Subjective personal pronoun. Objective personal pronoun. Possessive personal pronoun. Demonstrative pronouns. Interrogative pronouns. Relative pronouns. Indefinite pronouns. Reflexive pronouns. Intensive pronouns. Transitive verb. Intransitive verb. Helping verb. Descriptive adjective. Quantitative adjective. Proper adjective. Demonstrative adjective. Possessive adjectives. Simple preposition. Prepositional phrase. Allegory. Alliteration. Allusion. Anachronism. Anaphora. Anastrophe. Personification. Archetype. Colloquialism. Dramatic irony. Euphemism. Exposition, when the narrative provides background information in order to help the reader understand what's going on. Frame story. Hyperbole, an exaggerated statement that emphasizes the significance of the statement's actual meaning. Imagery appeals to the reader's senses through highly descriptive language. Irony creates a contrast between how things seem and how they really are. Juxtaposition places two or more dissimilar characters, themes, concepts, etc. side by side, and profound contrast highlights their differences. Metaphor compares two things by saying that one of them is the other. Motif recurs throughout the novel and helps develop the theme of the narrative. Onomatopoeia refers to words that sound like the thing they're referring to. Oxymoron comes from two contradictory words that describe one thing. Paradox, a statement that asks people to think outside the box by providing seemingly illogical premises. Satire, used to make fun of some aspect of human nature or society, usually through exaggeration, ridicule, or irony. Simile draws resemblance between two things by using like or as. Soliloquy, a character speaking their thoughts aloud, usually at length. Symbolism, used to represent abstract concepts and ideas in their stories. Synecdoche, used of a part to represent a whole. Tone refers to the overall mood and message of your book. Socratic seminar, teacher-led discussion strategy in which the teacher engages students in dialogues by responding to questions with questions instead of just providing answers. Although it engages higher-order thinking, it can be a time-consuming technique. Comma splice, the use of a comma to join two independent clauses. Coordinating conjunctions, fanboys. Pronoun antecedents, the noun that a pronoun refers to. Volta, the shift or point of dramatic change in a poem. Logical fallacy, a mistake in reasoning. Fallacy, a false or mistaken idea. Sonnet, 14-line poem. Ode, a tribute to the subject, although the subject does not have to be dead. Ballad, a form of narrative verse that can be poetic or musical. Vernacular, everyday language of ordinary people. Dialect, a regional variety of a language distinguished by vocabulary, spelling, and pronunciation. Jargon, special words or expressions that are used by a particular profession or group and are difficult for others to understand. Spanglish, combination of Spanish and English spoken by Hispanic Americans. Atlas, book of maps. Anticipation guide. Think, pair, share, a technique in which students working in pairs learn from one another and get to try out their ideas in a non-threatening context before presenting them to the class. Elevator pitch, very concise presentation of an idea covering all of its critical aspects and delivered within a few seconds. Pre-writing, the process of getting your concrete details down on paper before you organize your essay into paragraphs. Drafting, prepare a preliminary version of. Publishing, fifth stage of the writing process, making the text ready to share with an audience. Revising, third stage of the writing process, refining, changing ideas or concepts in the text. Demographic, having certain characteristics in common, such as age, race, or gender. Demolition, destruction. Demote, to lower in rank or authority. Informative essay, essay written to inform others about a topic. Narrative essay, tells a true story. Persuasive essay, attempts to convince reader to take a course of action or adopt the writer's position on an issue. Creative essay, presents an imaginative response to a literary work. Blank verse, poetry written with a precise meter, almost always iambic pentameter, that does not rhyme. Rhyme poetry, rhyme although the rhyme schemes vary. Free verse, poetry that lacks a consistent rhyme scheme, metrical pattern or musical form. Epics, lengthy, narrative work of poetry, usually detail extraordinary feats and adventures of characters from a distant past. Narrative poetry tells a story. Haiku, three-line poetic form originating in Japan. 5-7-5. Pastoral poetry, poem that concerns the natural world, rural life, and landscapes. Sonnet, a 14-line poem typically concerning the topic of love. Elegies, a poem that reflects upon death or loss. Limerick, 5-line poem that consists of a single stanza of a rhyme scheme and the subject is short in description. Maya Angelou wrote I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, African-American autobiographer and poet. Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Northanger Abbey, Emma, Mansfield Park. Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451, Themes, Censorship, Knowledge versus Ignorance. Willa Cather, A Wagner Matinee. Stephen Crane wrote Red Badge of Courage, American novelist, short story writer, poet, journalist, raised in NY and NJ, style and technique, naturalism, realism, impressionism, themes, ideals v realities, spiritual crisis, fears. Emily Dickinson, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. Ralph Waldo Emerson, American transcendentalist who was against slavery and stressed self-reliance, optimism, self-improvement, self-confidence, and freedom. He was a prime example of a transcendentalist and helped further the movement. F. Scott Fitzgerald, a novelist and chronicler of the Jazz Age. His wife, Zelda, and he were the couple of the decade but hit bottom during the Depression. His novel The Great Gatsby is considered a masterpiece about a gangster's pursuit of an unattainable rich girl. Anne Frank, young Jewish girl who kept a diary of her experiences during the Holocaust in World War II. Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Zora Neale Hurston, another writer of the Harlem Renaissance, she would walk up and down streets collecting folk tales. Her book Their Eyes Were Watching God expressed her longing for independence. John Keats, Ode to a Nightingale, Endymion, The Eve of St. Agnes Brit, 19th century poet. Harper Lee wrote Cam, grew up in Alabama, father was a lawyer, lives as a recluse, grew up with Truman Capote, who Dull is based on, won the Pulitzer Peace Prize. C.S. Lewis. Harlem Renaissance, a period in the 1920s when African-American achievements in art and music and literature flourished. Zora Langston. British Romantics, John Keats, Percy Shelley, Lord Byron. Metaphysical poets: John Donne, Andrew Marvell, George Herbert. Transcendentalism. Old English period. Example: Beowulf. Middle English period. Examples: Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, Moore's Utopia, Malory's La Morte and the morality play Everyman. British Renaissance. Worldview shifts from religious life to life on earth. Development of human potential. Many aspects of love. Examples include William Shakespeare, John Donne, Christopher Marlowe. Cavalier poets. Metaphysical poets. British neoclassical period emphasizes reason and logic and stresses harmony, stability, and wisdom. Writers: Jane Austen, Daniel Defoe, John Dryden, and Jonathan Swift. British Romantic period, rich in literary criticism and non-fictional prose. Jane Austen, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, George Gordon, Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, John Keats, Bronte sisters, George Eliot. American colonial period, colonial and revolutionary writers: Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and Thomas Paine. William Bradford and Bradstreet, Jonathan Edwards, Captain John Smith. American Renaissance, a literary explosion during the 1840s inspired in part by Emerson's ideas on the liberation of the individual. British Victorian period. Examples: Dickens' Great Expectations, Tennyson's poems, Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and Jude the Obscure, and Browning's Sonnets from the Portuguese. American Naturalistic period, 19th century, a literary movement that claimed to portray life exactly as if it were being examined through a scientist's microscope. Writers: Frank Norris, John Steinbeck, Stephen Crane, Theodore Dreiser, Ellen Glasgow, and Jack London. American Modernist period, 1920s–1940, economic crisis and wounds from war. Major writers: Fitzgerald, Hemingway, Steinbeck. American Postmodernist period, 1945 onward, absurdity and coincidence. People observe life as the media presents it. Popular culture saturates people's lives. Story, narrative based on true events, which is repeated and sometimes embellished upon to emphasize a particular value. Drama, a story written to be performed by actors. Poetry, a kind of rhythmic, compressed language that uses figures of speech and imagery designed to appeal to our emotions and imagination. Literary nonfiction, text that includes literary elements and devices usually associated with fiction to report on actual persons, places, or events. Examples include nature and travel text, biography, memoir, and the essay. Biography, story of a person's life written by another person. Essay, a short piece of writing on a particular subject. Fable, a brief story that leads to a moral, often using animals as characters. Fairy tale, a fictional tale marked by fantasy and magic, often appealing to the imagination. Folk tale, a story passed down from person to person by word of mouth. Historical fiction, a type of realistic fiction that takes place in a particular time period in the past. Often the setting is real, but the characters are made up from the author's imagination. Legend, a narrative handed down from the past containing historical elements and usually supernatural elements. Mystery, a suspenseful story about a puzzling event that is not solved until the end of the story. Myth, a traditional story about gods, ancestors, or heroes told to explain the natural world or the customs and beliefs of a society. Realism, a 19th century artistic movement in which writers and painters sought to show life as it is rather than life as it should be. Science fiction, a type of fantasy that uses science and technology. Characterization, the process by which the writer reveals the personality of a character. Cliché, a worn-out idea or overused expression. Diction, word choice. Mood, feeling or atmosphere that a writer creates for the reader. First-person POV, the point of view is told by the character that uses the first-person pronoun I. Second-person POV, the narrator tells the story using the pronouns you, your, and yours to address a reader or listener directly. Third-person POV. The narrator tells the story using the pronouns he, she, and it when referring to a person, place, thing, or idea. Third-person omniscient POV. Point of view in which an all-knowing narrator who is privy to the thoughts and actions of any or all characters. Style. A basic and distinctive mode of expression. Tone. Attitude a writer takes toward the audience, a subject, or a character. Voice. A writer's distinctive use of language. Rhyme scheme. A regular pattern of rhyming words in a poem. Rhythm. Pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. Figurative language. Language that cannot be taken literally since it was written to create a special effect or feeling. Text-to-self connection. A personal connection made with a story, movie, or other text. Text-to-text connection relates the text to another text, written word, and media such as books, radio, and pictures. Predicting. Making a forecast of what will happen in the future based on past experience or evidence. Summarizing. Briefly stating the main points and key details of a work in your own words. Modeling. The process of observing and imitating a specific behavior. Scaffolding. Adjusting the support offered during a teaching session to fit the child's current level of performance. Building metacognition. Making students aware of reading strategies and how to use those strategies to learn with text, helping students activate self-knowledge and self-monitoring. Skimming. Rapid, superficial reading of material to determine central ideas and main elements. Semantic feature analysis. A graphic organizer using a grid to compare a series of words or other items on a number of characteristics. Syntax. Sentence structure. Affix. A prefix or suffix. Compare-contrast. Give an account of similarities and differences between two items or situations, referring to both of them throughout. Chronological order. A method of speech organization in which the main points follow a time pattern. Spatial sequence. Spatial, geometrical, or geographical arrangement of ideas according to their position in space. Cause and effect. The reason something happens and the result of it happening. Problem and solution. A text structure that presents a problem and offers solutions to solve the problem. Collaborative writing. Instructional approach in which students work together to plan, draft, revise, and edit compositions. Process writing. Process writing is especially effective for L2 learners because it allows them to write about their own experiences and thus opportunities for L2 development are enhanced. L2 writers benefit from L1 models and cooperative assistance. Promote fluency first and then address editing. Holistic scoring. Summarizing a student's performance on an assessment with a single score. Peer review. A review by people with similar professional qualification. Scoring rubrics. Rules that are used to determine the quality of a student's performance. Portfolios. A selected collection of student work that demonstrates strengths and weaknesses. Conferencing. To confer with another about your writing. Meeting with your teacher to review an essay. Self-assessments. Based on what you think of yourself. Formative assessments. Provides feedback so instruction can be adjusted based on student needs. Summative assessments. A. Occurs at the end of instruction. B. Provides a summary of accomplishments. D. End of chapter, midterms, final exam. Think, pair, share. A technique in which students working in pairs learn from one another and get to try out their ideas in a non-threatening context before presenting them to the class. Small group. A group small enough for everyone to interact directly with all the other members. Whole class. Instruction is delivered to all of the students in the class at the same time in the same way.